Welcome to Hidden Wounds, where we unearth the true accounts of individuals who, when pushed into a corner, refused to become casualties and chose instead to become architects of consequence. Today, we bring you a narrative that is certain to leave an indelible mark on your psyche. Before we delve into Arthur's masterful journey of strategic retribution, be advised that this story explores mature themes of familial betrayal, corporate malfeasance, and meticulously planned justice. If you find intense emotional narratives challenging, please exercise discretion. However, if you are prepared to witness how a 62-year-old man transformed a moment of public humiliation into a lifetime of private victory, and how an act of casual cruelty was met with a masterclass in repercussions, then make yourself comfortable. Because what Arthur Beaumont orchestrated against the family who branded him a fossilized relic at his own son's wedding will fundamentally restore your belief in a balanced scale. My name is Arthur Beaumont, and I am 62 years old. I have erected two empires from the ground up, one in energy, the other in luxury timepieces. I have never once forgotten an offense, most especially the one that transpired at my son's wedding. A night where the champagne flowed like forced laughter and camera flashes illuminated the room like bolts of lightning. The receiving line snaked with rehearsed elegance through the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into 1,000 rainbows across the polished marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of white gardenias and expensive cologne. I was wearing a bespoke Brioni tuxedo that cost more than a respectable sedan, and on my wrist a Patek Philippe that was a testament to a lifetime of discipline. My salt and pepper hair was impeccably styled, and my presence was one of quiet authority. I was immensely proud that evening. My son, Evan, looked distinguished in his tailored suit, and despite my deep-seated reservations about his choice of a life partner, I held on to the hope that our mutual love for him could forge some common ground. I was profoundly mistaken. Isabella Vance, soon to be Isabella Beaumont, stood beside Evan in her designer gown, her smile as brilliant as a spotlight and just as contrived. Her parents served as her bookends. Gregory Vance, a portly man with soft hands and gleaming Italian loafers, and Margaret Vance, whose jewels were a testament to new money and whose eyes constantly scanned the room, calculating social leverage. When it was my turn to greet them, I extended my hand with the same dignified courtesy I had offered to oil tycoons and international dignitaries. "Congratulations, Isabella. You look radiant." Isabella took my hand, her grip intentionally sharp, her manicured nails pressing into my palm. She then turned to her parents, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Mom, Dad, this is the fossilized relic we now have to put up with." The words lingered in the air, acrid as burnt toast. Gregory Vance's laugh was instantaneous and obsequious, the sound of a man desperate to curry favor with his daughter. Margaret's laughter followed, a shrill, performative sound clearly intended for the smartphones I could see recording out of the corner of my eye. They were laughing at me. At 62, in my Brioni and my Patek Philippe, the man who had clawed his way up from a dusty Texas oil field to commanding boardrooms that smelled of old leather and new contempt. The man who was fluent in crude oil futures, Mandarin, and the unspoken language of executives who believed I couldn't grasp the scale of their ambitions. I remained perfectly still. My expression was unchanged, my hand still extended. I had learned a long time ago that silence is not weakness. Silence is where you store ammunition. Gregory Vance's laughter was the first to falter. His gaze locked onto my face, truly seeing me for the first time, and I watched as a dawning realization spread across his features like a dreadful sunrise. "Sir," he stammered, his voice suddenly heavy with a mixture of fear and astonishment, "are you "Are you the anonymous investor who just bought out my company?" The question detonated in the receiving line. Conversation ceased. Champagne flutes paused mid-air. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to strike a discordant note. I took a sip of my water, never alcohol at business functions, even the ones disguised as family celebrations, and met his gaze with the same unyielding stare I reserved for senators and CEOs who mistook politeness for passivity. "Congratulations on your daughter's marriage, Mr. Vance," I said, my voice as crisp and unfeeling as a legal contract. "It seems we're family now." Around us, I could feel the silent shockwave expanding. Phones were still recording. Isabella's face had lost all its color, matching her white roses. Margaret's laugh had twisted into a strangled cough. The wedding photographer, assuming this was a poignant family exchange, captured Gregory's expression of absolute horror with professional precision. And Evan, my son, my only child, the boy I had raised with every possible advantage that wealth and love could offer. Evan looked away. He chose the path of least resistance, feigning ignorance of his wife's public degradation of his own father. That was his answer. That was all I needed to know about where his allegiances now lay. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from James Morrison, my lead counsel. "Closing complete. Congratulations, Mr. Beaumont. You are now the majority shareholder and executive chairman of Vance Manufacturing." The acquisition had been months in the making. Gregory Vance's legacy manufacturing company had been bleeding cash for years, compromising on quality, underpaying its workforce, and ignoring environmental regulations. I don't salvage dying enterprises. I acquire their assets and rebuild them correctly. I had spent 3 months circling Vance Manufacturing like a patient predator, discreetly buying up its debt at a discount, sending in my own consultants disguised as marketing experts who documented their financial disarray instead of their products. Gregory Vance had been so preoccupied with his daughter's ascent into my family's sphere of influence that he never even noticed his own company being quietly consumed. This very morning, while he was fussing with his tie and I was having a final briefing with my team, the last documents had been signed. Vance Manufacturing was now mine. Its debts, its employees, its reputation, and its future. Gregory Vance was now the former owner of a company that for him no longer existed. His name was on the verge of vanishing from business registries. His employees were about to learn that their new boss was the man his daughter had just publicly derided as a fossilized relic in front of 300 wedding guests and countless recording devices. I smiled for the photographer, a genuine smile this time. "Thank you for such a warm welcome to the family," I said to the Vances, my voice carrying across the ballroom with crystalline clarity. "I'm certain we'll be seeing a great deal more of each other." The evening wore on. I danced with the appropriate partners, complimented the floral arrangements, and maintained a pleasant facade. But internally, my mind was already at work planning, calculating, and measuring the precise distance between this insult and their utter annihilation. They had craved a spectacle. I would give them a saga. That night, alone in my penthouse suite overlooking the city, I changed from my tuxedo into a silk dressing gown and poured a single glass of 30-year-old single malt. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the sprawling tapestry of lights, some of them powered by the energy I had harnessed from the earth, others illuminating buildings where men wore the timepieces I had designed. I raised my glass to my reflection. "To the fossilized relic," I said aloud. "May he teach you the stark difference between wealth and power." Sunday morning arrived with coffee as black as crude oil and newspapers that still carried the scent of ink and ambition. I sat in my home office, a glass-encased sanctuary 30 floors above the city, and surveyed my holdings with the methodical precision of a general reviewing his territories. Apex Energy Solutions, with a market cap of $47 billion and proven reserves spanning 3 continents, was a company I had forged from a single, struggling rig in West Texas when oil was a mere $13 a barrel and boardrooms reeked of cigar smoke and condescension. Beaumont Timepieces, a purveyor of luxury watches and accessories, boasted flagship stores in New York, Paris, London, and Tokyo. Each piece was a testament to handcrafted excellence, bearing my signature, a small, elegant B that had become synonymous with power worn beautifully. The Vance Manufacturing acquisition was a mere footnote in my portfolio, barely a rounding error in my quarterly financial statements. But I had learned that footnotes, if placed strategically, could topple empires. My assistant, Eleanor, knocked softly before entering with a secure tablet. "The transition team is on standby, Mr. Beaumont. Legal has drafted the morning briefings." "Thank you, Eleanor. Have them wait 10 minutes. I need to review yesterday's festivities." The wedding footage had already been meticulously compiled and cataloged by my media team. I watched Isabella's insult on a loop, analyzing the angles, the lighting, the reactions of the other guests. I saw Gregory Vance's horrified realization, Margaret's nervous laughter dying in her throat, and Evan, my son, averting his gaze at the precise moment his father required his support. I had raised Evan in glass towers and rarefied air, sending him to private schools, where the tuition exceeded most people's annual salaries, with summers in the Hamptons and winters in Aspen. I had provided him with every advantage, every opportunity, every privilege that money and influence could secure. What I had failed to give him, it seemed, was a spine. He craved applause more than authenticity, and Isabella Vance had identified that weakness long before I did. She saw my son as a gilded ladder, a means to elevate herself from her family's provincial success to the realm of real power. What she hadn't accounted for was that this realm already had a gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper had no tolerance for social climbers who mistook cruelty for sophistication. The history of the Vance family was an open book. Gregory had inherited Vance Manufacturing from his father, who had built it from the ground up in the 1940s. 3 generations of quality craftsmanship had been systematically dismantled under Gregory's leadership, reduced to cost-cutting measures that compromised both product integrity and worker safety. I had been observing Vance Manufacturing for 18 months, not out of malice, but out of sound business acumen. The company had a solid foundation, excellent facilities, a skilled workforce, and a brand name that still held some cachet with consumers who remembered when American-made was a mark of quality. What it lacked was leadership that understood the distinction between profit and plunder. Gregory Vance had been methodically cannibalizing his own inheritance. Late payments to suppliers, deferred maintenance on critical equipment, and environmental violations that would have shuttered the plant if the right inspector had visited on the wrong day. Most damningly, he had been systematically underpaying his workers while expanding his personal fleet of company-funded luxury vehicles. I don't rescue failing companies. I acquire their assets and rebuild them from a solid foundation. The blind trust I used for the acquisition was so legally labyrinthine that it would take forensic accountants to trace its ownership back to me. Gregory, preoccupied with wedding plans and his daughter's social ambitions, had never bothered to investigate who was discreetly buying up his debt. That was his first critical error. His second was raising a daughter who believed insults were a form of currency. My phone rang Evan's number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Good morning, son." "Dad, we need to talk." His voice had the petulant edge I remembered from his teenage years, a time when consequences were abstract concepts and apologies were a currency he seldom needed to spend. "I'm listening. Isabella is upset about last night. She says you embarrassed her family at the reception." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. "I see. And what is your account of what happened last night, Evan?" Silence. The kind of silence children use when they know the truth but are hoping a more convenient version will suffice. "Look, Dad, Isabella was nervous. She didn't mean whatever it is you think she said. Maybe you misheard her. I have the video, Evan. Multiple angles, professional, grade audio. Your wife called me a fossilized relic to her parents, who then laughed on camera. At my expense, at our family's expense. She was just joking." No. The word landed with the finality of a judge's gavel. She was not joking. She was establishing a hierarchy, making it clear that I was to be tolerated, not respected. She was setting the tone for how your new family intends to treat your old one. Another silence. Longer this time. I could almost picture him, desperately trying to find a path that didn't involve choosing a side. "What do you want me to do, Dad? Divorce her? We just got married yesterday. I want you to be the man I raised you to be. I want you to protect the family that gave you everything, not abandon it for people whose character is revealed by insulting their elders at a wedding reception." It's not that simple. It is precisely that simple, Evan. Complexity is the excuse people use when they wish to avoid making difficult choices. Your wife insulted me publicly. Your new in-laws laughed. You did nothing. That simplifies matters considerably. I ended the call before he could formulate a response and walked to my window wall. The city spread out below me like a vast circuit board, a network of connections, power grids, and carefully managed energy flows. I had learned to read cities the way others read books. Infrastructure as narrative, money as character development, and power as the only plot that truly mattered. Eleanor knocked again. "The transition team is ready, Mr. Beaumont. Legal confirms the Vance building is secure, and HR has prepared the all-hands announcement." "Thank you. Just one more call." I dialed James Morrison, my lead attorney, the man who had orchestrated the Vance acquisition with surgical precision. "James, excellent work on the closing. I want you to prepare the 30-day transition plan we discussed. Full implementation, no exceptions." "Of course, Arthur. The Vance family is going to be surprised." "James, I didn't build 2 Fortune 500 companies by being concerned with other people's feelings. The Vance family chose to make this personal at my son's wedding. I am simply responding in kind." "Understood. The new signage is ready for installation. Security protocols are in place, and the staff transition documents are prepared. We can begin tomorrow morning." "Perfect. And James, I want this executed cleanly. No drama, no theatrics. Just business. Cold, legal, unstoppable business. That's what we do best, Arthur." After the call, I opened my laptop and began reviewing the personnel files for Vance Manufacturing. 43 employees, most of whom had been with the company for over a decade. Good people, skilled workers, treated like overhead expenses by an owner who saw them as line items rather than human assets. That was about to change. By tomorrow night, Gregory Vance would discover that his family business was no longer his. His employees would learn that their new owner was the man his daughter had insulted at her wedding. The local media would start asking questions about the environmental violations and worker safety issues that had been swept under the rug for years. And Isabella, the beautiful, cruel Isabella who thought insults were accessories, would learn that some accessories have sharp edges that draw blood from the careless. The transition team would manage the mechanical aspects of the takeover. My role was much simpler. I would demonstrate the difference between being embarrassing and being embarrassed. One was a choice, the other was a consequence. By the time I was finished, the Vance family would understand both with intimate clarity. Monday morning, 7:00 a.m. sharp. The Vance manufacturing building stood against the dawn sky, a monument to faded glory. Its red brick was weathered by decades of New England winters. Its windows were grimy, and its parking lot was pocked with puddles reflecting the gray, overcast sky. I arrived in my black Mercedes, followed by a convoy of legal and transition specialists in equally discreet vehicles. It was simply business, arriving to claim what it now owned. The first indication of the new order came at 7:01 a.m. When Gregory Vance's access card flashed red, the automated message was polite but firm. Access denied. Please contact Human Resources. By 7:15, my team had secured the building. By 7:30, the staff began to arrive, greeted by new faces at the reception desk and unfamiliar cars parked in the executive spaces. Before claiming the corner office, before meeting with management, before any act that could be perceived as a conquest, I walked the factory floor. I shook hands with every worker I could find, addressing them by name as Eleanor handed me the personnel files, inquiring about their families, their concerns, and their ideas for improving operations. "Mrs. Patterson," I said to a woman who had been operating a leather cutting station for 15 years, "I understand you've submitted suggestions for equipment upgrades that were never approved." She looked startled that I knew her name, and even more surprised that I knew about her proposals. "Yes, sir. The hydraulics on this cutting table are from 1987. We could increase precision and reduce waste with newer equipment. Consider it approved. Have your supervisor send the specifications to my office by the end of the day." Word spread through the factory floor faster than a summer storm. The new owner, whoever he was, knew their names, valued their ideas, and had just greenlit equipment upgrades that Gregory Vance had ignored for 3 years. By the time I reached the executive offices, a small crowd of workers had gathered to watch, not with hostility or celebration, but with a quiet curiosity about the man in the Italian suit and expensive watch, who spoke to them like colleagues instead of expenses. Gregory Vance arrived at 8:47 a.m., his face flushed from running across the parking lot, his normally perfect hair in disarray. He stormed through the main entrance like a man whose house was on fire, which, in a metaphorical sense, it was. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded of the security guard, formerly his security guard, now mine. "I'm Gregory Vance. I own this company." The guard, professionally trained and legally briefed, calmly offered him a chair and a bottle of water. "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll need to speak with Human Resources regarding building access. Mr. Beaumont is currently in a transition meeting with the department heads." "Beaumont? Who the hell is Beaumont?" At that precise moment, I emerged from the conference room, my timing as impeccable as a theater director's. Gregory's eyes met mine across the lobby, and I watched his expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, dawning horror. "Good morning, Gregory," I said, my voice carrying the professional warmth of a new business partner. "I was hoping we could have a conversation about the transition." "Transition? What transition? This is my company." "No," I said, deliberately pulling a leather-bound folder from my briefcase. "This is my company." As of Friday afternoon, the acquisition of Vance Manufacturing was completed through Beaumont Holdings. You are now founder emeritus, with no operational authority. Your office has been cleared, your access has been revoked, and your company vehicle is being repossessed as we speak. The lobby had fallen completely silent. Workers who had arrived for the morning shift stood frozen, watching their former boss learn that he was now, in every sense of the word, former. Gregory's face shifted through several shades of red and white. "You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have contracts." "You had debt, Gregory. Substantial debt that you personally guaranteed when you restructured the company's loans 2 years ago. I bought that debt. All of it, including the accelerated payment clauses that were triggered when your environmental violations were reported to the state, which, incidentally, happened this morning." I smiled with the warmth of an Arctic winter. "Environmental violations? What environmental violations?" "The tannery discharge issues you've been ignoring. The worker safety violations that OSHA will be very interested in reviewing. The wage and hour discrepancies that the Department of Labor will be keen to audit." I closed the folder with a soft final snap. "All reported, all documented, all with your signature on the cover-up attempts." Eleanor appeared at my elbow with a tablet. "Mr. Beaumont, the staff meeting is ready to begin." "Thank you." I looked back at Gregory, who was swaying slightly, as if the floor had tilted beneath his feet. "Gregory, you are welcome to attend the all-hands meeting, where I will be introducing myself to your former employees. I imagine they will be very interested in meeting their new owner." The conference room was packed. 43 employees, from machine operators to office staff, were crowded around the long table where Gregory Vance used to hold his monthly meetings about cost-cutting. I stood at the head of the table, my hands clasped, my watch catching the light. "Good morning. My name is Arthur Beaumont, and as of this morning, I am the owner and executive chair of this company. I want to address 3 things immediately." I paused, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "First, your jobs are safe. In fact, I am announcing an immediate cost of living adjustment for all hourly employees, funded by the elimination of unnecessary executive expenses." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. "Second, we will be investing in the equipment upgrades, safety improvements, and environmental compliance measures that should have been implemented years ago." The murmurs grew louder, more hopeful. "Third, this company will return to the standards of quality and respect for its workers that originally built its reputation." A hand went up in the back. Joe Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the stitching department. "Mr. Beaumont, what about Mr. Vance?" I glanced through the glass wall of the conference room to where Gregory stood in the lobby, still looking like a man who had woken up in someone else's life. "Mr. Vance is no longer with the company in any operational capacity. I am confident he will find other opportunities to pursue." The meeting lasted 30 minutes. When it concluded, the employees filed out with something in their expressions that I hadn't seen when I arrived: hope. That afternoon, I held a press conference. Nothing theatrical, just a simple announcement in the factory conference room with local business reporters. "Vance Manufacturing has been acquired by Beaumont Holdings," I announced. "We are committed to maintaining the company's tradition of American-made quality while implementing modern safety and environmental standards. The entire workforce will be retained, with immediate improvements to wages and working conditions." A reporter asked, "Mr. Beaumont, can you comment on the circumstances of the acquisition? We understand it was quite sudden. Business acquisitions are typically confidential until they are finalized," I replied. A technically true statement. The Vance family was aware of our interest, though they had been blissfully unaware that their anonymous debt holder was the man they had insulted just 2 days prior. By evening, the local business news was running the story. Local manufacturing company changes hands. New owner pledges worker improvements. What they didn't know and couldn't report was that the new owner was the man publicly humiliated by the seller's family just 48 hours earlier. That part of the story would emerge in due time, But I wanted the business narrative established first, a responsible acquisition by a leader committed to worker welfare. When the personal story surfaced, it would be a compelling subplot, not the main event. That evening, alone in my penthouse, I poured a glass of wine and stood at my windows. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages from Evan that I hadn't answered and calls from Gregory that I had blocked. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I had won the first battle in a war they didn't even know they were fighting. Vance Manufacturing was mine. Its 43 employees were now my responsibility. Its future was in my hands, not Gregory Vance's. I raised my glass to my reflection. Day one complete, I said aloud. Welcome to the consequences of underestimating me. Tuesday morning brought rain that drummed against my new office windows like impatient fingers. I sat behind Gregory's former desk, now cleared of his personal effects and sanitized of his poor decisions, reviewing the forensic audit results that had arrived overnight. The news was even worse than I had anticipated. James Morrison, my lead attorney, sat across from me with 3 thick binders of evidence. Arthur, we've uncovered systematic irregularities going back years. Vendor kickbacks, cover-ups of environmental violations, and what appears to be a deliberate scheme to avoid paying workers overtime. Show me the worst of it, I said. He opened the first binder, revealing a slush fund disguised as leather treatments that was actually being used for Gregory Vance's political donations. More concerning, he said, sliding a spreadsheet across the desk, is that Margaret Vance's charitable foundation was receiving vendor kickbacks disguised as donations. That's fraud. I studied the numbers. The Vance family hadn't just been cutting corners. They had been systematically looting their own company while their employees worked for wages that hadn't seen an increase in 3 years. What about the environmental issues? Tannery discharge violations dating back 18 months. Deliberately concealed OSHA safety violations. Altered worker injury reports to avoid regulatory scrutiny. James's expression was grim. Gregory Vance wasn't just a bad businessman, Arthur. He was a criminal who got lucky for far too long. File for a voluntary audit with all relevant agencies, I instructed. Full transparency, complete cooperation. That will destroy any remaining value in the Vance name. Good. The Vance name is a liability now. We are not in the business of protecting reputations that deserve to be ruined. By 10:00 a.m. I was in a meeting with the local union representative, Tommy Castellano, a man in his 50s who looked like he had spent his life fighting uphill battles. He sat across from me, his weathered hands folded, his eyes skeptical. Mr. Castellano, I began, I've reviewed the wage and benefit situation. I want to propose an immediate 15% across-the-board increase for all union members, plus retroactive overtime pay for all hours that were incorrectly classified over the past 2 years. His eyebrows shot up. What's the catch? No catch. This is what should have been happening all along. I'm also canceling Gregory Vance's consulting contract and selling his fleet of company vehicles. The proceeds will fund a health insurance upgrade and a safety equipment modernization program. Tommy leaned back. Mister, I've been dealing with management for 30 years. Nobody just gives away money without wanting something in return. I'm not giving away money, Mr. Castellano. I'm investing in the people who actually make this company valuable. Gregory Vance saw his employees as expenses. I see them as assets that appreciate when treated properly. What do you want from us? Quality work, honest communication, and a partnership in making this company profitable for everyone. The same things you've been asking for and not receiving. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. You're the man from the wedding, aren't you? The one Isabella Vance called a relic. I am. And now you own her daddy's company. I do. A slow smile spread across Tommy's face. Hell, mister, that's the best revenge story I've heard since my divorce. The union vote was unanimous. By noon, news of the wage increases had spread through the factory like wildfire. By 2:00 p.m., my phone was ringing with a call I had been expecting. Mr. Beaumont, this is Margaret Vance. I think we need to talk. Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance. How can I help you? You can stop this vindictive attack on my family? She screeched, her voice shrill with the indignation of someone who had never been held accountable. Gregory is devastated. Isabella is getting hate messages online. This has gone too far. I'm not sure what attack you're referring to, Mrs. Vance. I purchased a failing company and implemented improvements. That's simply called business. Don't play dumb with me. You're doing this because of what happened at the wedding. Because you couldn't take a joke. I set down my pen. Mrs. Vance, let me be very clear. Your daughter publicly humiliated me. Your husband laughed. You laughed. You all made a choice to treat me with contempt. That was a choice, and choices have consequences. The consequence of treating me like an embarrassment is that you now get to experience actual embarrassment. The kind that comes with federal audits and newspaper headlines about how badly you've been cheating your workers. You can't do this to us. We'll fight you. With what money, Mrs. Vance? Your husband's company is gone. The environmental fines will consume your savings. The civil lawsuits from the workers will finish off whatever is left. And your charitable foundation, the one that received those vendor kickbacks? That's going to be very interesting to explain to the IRS. A heavy silence fell on the line. How do you know about... I know about everything, Mrs. Vance. The political slush fund, the safety violations, the kickback scheme. I know because I own the company now, which means I own all the records your husband thought he could hide forever. I want you to understand that some people fight back. I want you to learn that wealth without wisdom is just money waiting to be lost. And I want you to remember this moment the next time you think about laughing at someone who is smarter, tougher, and considerably more dangerous than you realized. I hung up before she could respond. The call from Evan came at 6:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Desperation should always wait for composure. Hello, Evan. Dad, we need to talk. In person. Today. His voice was strained, the sound of a man who had spent sleepless nights discovering that his choices had a price he couldn't afford. I'm listening, not over the phone. This is family business. I set down my coffee cup. Family business? How interesting. I wasn't aware you still considered me family after your response to your wife's public humiliation of me. That's what I want to talk about. There's been a misunderstanding, Evan. I have video footage from 17 different angles and audio from 12 separate phones. There was no misunderstanding. There was an insult, followed by laughter, followed by your choice to pretend it didn't happen. A silence hung on the line. Can you please can we meet? 1 hour. That's all I ask. My office, noon, and bring your lawyer. My lawyer? Dad, this is a family conversation. No, Evan. This is a business conversation about family assets. If you want to discuss the Beaumont Family Trust, you need legal representation. If you want to discuss your mother's feelings, you need a therapist. Choose accordingly. I hung up and spent the next 5 hours reviewing the documents that would change my son's life forever. The Beaumont Family Trust had been established when Evan turned 21, a comprehensive vehicle for transferring wealth across generations. However, the documents contained provisions that my younger, more optimistic self had insisted upon clauses about character, integrity, and respect for family. Specifically, language about sustained disrespect toward the settler, meaning me, and the trustee's authority to revoke distributions based on a beneficiary's conduct. My attorney had thought the moral clauses were unnecessary. Now, 15 years later, they were about to prove their worth. At noon, Evan arrived with Richard Steinberg, a family law attorney known for shielding the wealthy from their poor decisions. I slid a copy of the trust document across the table. Page 47, Section 12, Subsection C. Please read it aloud, Mr. Steinberg. Richard found the page and read, his voice shrinking with each word. In the event that any beneficiary engages in sustained conduct that demonstrates fundamental disrespect toward the settler, the trustee may, in his sole discretion, suspend, modify, or terminate said beneficiary's interest in the trust. Evan's face had gone pale. Dad, you can't be serious. That was theoretical. Nothing I write is theoretical, Evan. I am always serious about money, family, and consequences. I spread out screenshots of his wife's social media posts, transcripts, and evidence of his inaction at the wedding. Your wife called me a fossilized relic. Her parents laughed. You walked away. That constitutes sustained disrespect and willful abandonment. It was one incident. No, Evan. It was a pattern that culminated in one public incident. For months, your wife has been making disparaging comments about me. She has consistently portrayed me as an obstacle. The trust suspension takes effect immediately. Your monthly distributions are terminated. Your access to trust-funded assets is revoked. The penthouse apartment, which is owned by a trust subsidiary, reverts to trust control. What about Isabella? Evan's voice cracked. She's pregnant. We're starting a family. Congratulations. I hope you've been saving your money, because trust funds are no longer available to support your lifestyle. I stood up. You have 30 days to vacate the penthouse. That evening, I watched on my security monitors as Evan and a crying Isabella loaded their belongings into a rented U-Haul. His confident demeanor was gone, replaced by the mechanical movements of a defeated man learning that family money was a privilege, not a right. His call came a few minutes later. Dad, please, we'll do whatever you want. We'll apologize publicly. Evan, you're speaking to the wrong parent. You should be having this conversation with your wife's family. They are the ones you chose. They should support you through the consequences of their choices. They can't. Gregory's company is gone. They're facing lawsuits. Yes, I'm aware of their legal difficulties. I created most of them. Perhaps you should have considered that before, laughing along with their cruel jokes. I never laughed. You did something worse, Evan. You walked away. You abandoned your father to protect your own comfort. That was your choice. This is mine. I hung up and turned off my phone. From my penthouse windows, I could see the U-Haul pulling away, carrying my son and his wife toward a future where trust funds were memories instead of certainties. I poured a glass of wine. To the price of choosing poorly, I said aloud. May the lesson be expensive enough to be permanent. Monday morning brought news of another victory. The forensic audit had uncovered something extraordinary. James Morrison entered my office, his expression grimly satisfied. Arthur, the vendor kickback scheme was more sophisticated than we thought. Isabella Vance has been receiving payments through a shell LLC registered to her personal styling company. He slid the financial records across my desk. Vance Manufacturing has been paying influencer marketing fees to a company owned entirely by Isabella. The payments were authorized by her father. The problem is, there's no evidence that any actual marketing services were ever provided. Regular payments of $500 a month for 18 months. A total of $153 zero in fraudulent invoices. So, she was essentially stealing money from her father's company to fund her lifestyle while they were cutting worker wages, I stated, a feeling of grim satisfaction settling in. Precisely, James confirmed. File a civil suit against both Isabella and her styling company. Fraud, unjust enrichment, conspiracy. I want every dollar recovered, plus damages. That same week, I planned an event that would highlight the chasm between earned wealth and stolen comfort. The Workers' Recognition Gala would be held on the main factory floor of what was now officially renamed the Beaumont Manufacturing Division. I sent invitations to every employee and their families for a full dinner, open bar, and live music, the kind of event they never experienced under Gregory's tenure. The day the invitations went out, a process server found Isabella at a trendy brunch spot. The civil lawsuit was delivered to her table just as her eggs Benedict arrived. Her subsequent Instagram story, a vague post about family members using resources to hurt those they're supposed to love, backfired spectacularly. Commenters were quick to point out that stealing from workers' wages to fund a luxury lifestyle was not a sympathetic position. The gala was a resounding success. I stood at the entrance, greeting each worker and their family personally. The local news cameras captured it all. The underpaid workers enjoying an elegant dinner, hosted by the man who had rescued their jobs while their former boss faced federal investigation. During my brief speech, I didn't attack the previous management. I simply celebrated the skilled, dedicated professionals who had been undervalued for too long. The applause was genuine and warm. The next day, a social media post from a worker's teenage daughter went viral locally. It showed her mother, smiling in an evening gown at an elegant table. The caption read, "My mom worked here for 15 years for people who never knew her name. Last night, the new owner threw a party just to say thank you. This is what it looks like when good people are in charge. Workers deserve respect." Isabella's response was swift and ill-advised. An Instagram story calling the gala performative and suggesting I was just buying good press. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Users pointed out that the gala had been funded by me personally, while her father had been stealing from the workers' wages. Within hours, she deleted the story, but the damage was done. Her remaining brand partnerships began to evaporate. The culmination of this phase came with an unscheduled visit from Margaret Vance. She sat in my office, her composure gone, and begged me to stop. "My family is being destroyed." "Your family destroyed itself, Mrs. Vance. I'm simply declining to help you cover up the damage." "We can pay back the money," she pleaded. "With what money?" I asked, my voice as cold as polished marble. "Your husband's company is gone. Your foundation is under federal investigation. Your daughter's business is facing fraud charges. Where exactly will this repayment money come from?" She had no answer. She had finally understood that actions have prices, and some prices cannot be negotiated. As she left, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Federal prosecutors want to meet about criminal referrals. Are you ready for the next phase?" I smiled and typed back, "Schedule the meeting. It's time for the Vance family's education to become more expensive." 6 months after the wedding, the depositions began. I wasn't present, but James's reports were more satisfying than any stage play. Gregory Vance, under oath, blamed everyone but himself. He blamed global economics for cutting wages, while his wine club membership was paid by the company. He blamed regulatory overreach for the environmental violations he had systematically covered up. Margaret Vance's deposition was even more of a disaster. Her flimsy defense of her charity crumbled under scrutiny as prosecutors detailed how its administrative costs included travel, restaurant meals, and cosmetic procedures. But it was Isabella's deposition that sealed their fate. Confronted with the 153 zero in payments for which she provided almost no services, she made her fatal mistake. Instead of feigning ignorance, she tried to justify it. My family built that company from nothing. We deserve to benefit from its success. When the prosecutor asked about the wedding incident, Isabella revealed the depth of her entitlement. If Arthur Beaumont wasn't so vindictive and petty, he would have handled family issues privately instead of destroying people's lives over a wedding joke. The prosecutor was unmoved. Miss Vance, your family wasn't destroyed by a wedding joke. Your family was destroyed by 4 years of criminal activity that was discovered when Mr. Beaumont became your father's business partner and was legally obligated to report what he found. Do you understand that distinction? Her own words had destroyed them more completely than any plan I could have devised. James's assessment was blunt. Arthur, they've buried themselves. He outlined the likely prison sentences: 8 to 12 years for Gregory, 5 to 8 for Margaret, and 6 to 10 for Isabella, whose lack of remorse was an aggravating factor. The social fallout was merciless. Boston Lifestyle magazine, which had once featured Isabella, ran a follow-up piece titled "The Price of Influence: When Lifestyle Bloggers Break the Law." It included a devastating side-by-side photo. Isabella in a 3-0 dress next to factory workers in worn uniforms operating outdated equipment. After a tone-deaf spa post captioned "Self-Care Sunday," the hashtag #EmptyCupfulCrimes trended for 3 days. She deleted her entire social media presence shortly after. The Boston Business Journal's year-end issue named Beaumont Manufacturing Division a winner and the Vance family losers. The article detailed their complete social and financial destruction, noting that their civil liabilities now exceeded their frozen assets by millions. 3 days before Christmas, the Vances filed for bankruptcy. 1 year to the day after Isabella Vance called me a fossilized relic, I stood on the renovated factory floor of Beaumont Manufacturing Division for the first annual Excellence Awards ceremony. The transformation was stunning. The facility was now a showcase of American manufacturing, and the workers, who had been undervalued for years, were thriving. During my speech, I addressed the motivation behind the transformation. 1 year ago, at my son's wedding, I was publicly humiliated by people who thought my age and gender made me a safe target for mockery. They were wrong about my character, wrong about my capabilities, and catastrophically wrong about the consequences of underestimating someone who has spent 62 years learning how to fight. I raised a glass of champagne. But they were also wrong about business. They believed that cutting corners, exploiting workers, and ignoring regulations were the paths to profitability. This company is now more profitable, more productive, and more sustainable than it has ever been. We have proven that treating people with dignity and operating within the law are not obstacles to success. They are the foundations of it. The applause was thunderous. As the evening wound down, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize, but the message was unmistakable. It was from Gregory Reed. "Mr. Beaumont, I know you probably won't read this, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what we did wrong. The wedding, the business, all of it. I'm sorry. We lost everything, but maybe we deserved to." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Forgiveness was a luxury reserved for those who learn their lessons before federal prosecutors are required to teach them. Their bankruptcy was final. Their criminal trials were scheduled, and their ability to harm anyone else had been permanently revoked. That was justice enough. At home in my penthouse, I poured a final glass of wine. I raised it to my reflection, A man who had turned 62 years of experience into a weapon that was precise, legal, and utterly devastating. To the fossilized relic, I said aloud, who taught a family of criminals the difference between wealth and power, between inheritance and consequences, and between laughing at others and being laughed at by history. The wine tasted like victory. Victory tasted like justice. And justice tasted like the perfect balance between mercy and mathematics. The lesson was complete. The teacher was satisfied, and the students would remember their education for the rest of their lives. If this story of calculated justice resonated with you, ensure you subscribe and ring that notification bell, because every story shared here is a testament to the quiet strength that lies within. Share your thoughts below, and let's continue to support one another in the comments. Thank you for listening.